For 52 years, I lit a candle every year for the baby they told me was dead. I remember the smell of that hospital room, the cold, sterile air, the nurse's eyes darting away from mine, and the silence that followed my cries. They said my baby didn't make it. I believed them, because what else could I do? I was young, scared, and broken. But last winter, everything changed. My granddaughter got me one of those DNA kits, just a fun family gift, she said. I took the test, forgot about it, until weeks later when an envelope arrived. Inside was a name that made my heart stop. The child I mourned for 5 decades was alive. My hands trembled so hard I could barely hold the paper. I whispered her name out loud, and it felt like time folded in on itself. What I didn't know was that the truth I was about to uncover would shake the very foundation of my family. Before I tell you how I found out, make sure you're subscribed. Stories like this one remind us that truth always finds a way. It started as a simple gift. My granddaughter, Lila, handed me a small white box with a smile that could melt any heart. "Come on, Grandma," she said, "it's just for fun. Let's see where our family roots really come from." I laughed softly, brushing my thumb over the box. To her, it was a game. To me, it felt like opening a door I'd locked half a century ago. Still, I went along with it. We followed the instructions, and she sealed the tube and mailed it off. I didn't think much about it afterward, just another thing the young folks do for entertainment. Weeks passed. Then, one quiet evening, I received an email notification on my tablet. "Your DNA results are ready." Lila was the one who clicked the link first. I remember her voice trembling. "Grandma, there's a close match here." I leaned closer. The screen glowed with a name I'd never seen before: Grace Turner, age 52, Oregon, parent/child match 99.9%. For a moment, my mind went blank. I stared at the name, waiting for the numbers to change, for the system to correct itself, but it didn't. Parent/child, it repeated, over and over. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Grace Turner. 52. The age my firstborn would have been. My hand shook so badly that Lila had to hold the tablet steady for me. I whispered the name like a prayer. Grace Turner. It felt foreign and familiar all at once, like a ghost whispering back from a life I never got to live. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by my window until sunrise, holding that small box the kit came in, wondering what kind of truth I had just invited into my life. Could this really be my baby? Or was someone playing a cruel joke? If you've ever had a secret from your past come back to life, hit subscribe, because what happened next still gives me chills. For 3 days, I couldn't bring myself to open that DNA app again. Every time I did, that name, Grace Turner, stared back at me, as if waiting for me to claim her. I told myself it was a mistake. Maybe a glitch. Maybe I'd misunderstood the results. After all, things like this happen in movies, not real life. But deep down, something inside me, something I had buried under decades of silence, began to stir. Lila wouldn't let it go. "Grandma, you have to reach out," she insisted. "If there's even the slightest chance, don't you want to know?" I hesitated, then clicked the message button. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for nearly an hour before I typed. "Hello, Grace. I'm not sure how to say this, but our DNA results say we're related. I think there may be a story here you deserve to know." Then I froze. I couldn't press send. My heart pounded as old memories replayed, the hospital lights, my husband's cold voice, the nurse who wouldn't meet my eyes. I deleted the message and closed the app. That night, I dreamed of a baby's cry echoing down a long white hallway. When I woke up, Lila was sitting by my bed, holding my tablet. "Grandma," she whispered, "I sent it." I gasped. "You what?" She replied, Lila said softly. "You need to see this." On the screen, a new message waited. "I think you might be my mother." The world around me went silent. My pulse hammered as tears filled my eyes. The air felt heavier, like it carried 50 years of buried truth. We arranged a video call for the next day. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. I spent hours rehearsing what to say, what not to say. What if she hated me? What if she'd been told lies about who I was? When the call connected, I saw her face, familiar and yet so strange. She smiled through tears. I've been searching for you my whole life. But what she told me next made me realize my baby's death wasn't a mistake. It was a lie. If this moment gave you goosebumps, subscribe, because what she revealed next changed everything I thought I knew. When the call began, I could barely breathe. Grace's face filled the screen, soft brown eyes, a faint dimple when she smiled, and something achingly familiar in the way she tilted her head. My throat tightened. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if 50 years of silence were too heavy for words. Finally, she said, I always wondered why I didn't look like anyone in my family. I was adopted when I was a baby. The records said my mother died during childbirth. Her words hit me like a blade. Died during childbirth. That's what they told me about my baby. My heart pounded. Who handled your adoption? I asked. Grace leaned closer to the camera, her voice trembling. A private agency. The file listed a man named Charles Whitman as the sponsor. For a moment, the world tilted. Charles Whitman. My late husband. The same man who had held my hand in the hospital and whispered, "It's over." The baby didn't make it. Tears blurred my vision. I could almost hear his voice again, steady and cold. He had arranged it all. Paid for the adoption. Buried the truth along with my hope. Grace wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to upset you. But I wasn't upset, I was awakening. Decades of confusion and pain were finally making sense. Every unanswered question, every uneasy look from that nurse, every quiet argument in the hospital hallway. My husband hadn't lost our child, he had stolen her. He'd wanted control, wanted me to move on, to be the obedient wife he could manage. And he succeeded, for 52 years. That night, I sat alone in my living room, holding his old photograph. My voice trembled. You lied to me, Charles. You lied to both of us. For the first time, I didn't cry out of grief. I cried out of rage. And yet, beneath it all, I felt something else, relief. The truth had finally surfaced, even if it came too late. He died 5 years ago, and took the truth to his grave. Or so I thought. Subscribe if you believe secrets like this should never stay buried, because what came next proved that even the dead can't hide forever. When I arrived at the cafe, my heart felt like it was beating inside my throat. Grace stood by the window, twisting a napkin between her fingers. When our eyes met, something inside me shifted. It was like seeing a mirror that reflected 50 lost years. We didn't speak at first. We just held each other. Her hair smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent I used to wear when I was young. For the first time, I felt whole. After a few minutes, she whispered, I have so many questions. So do I said softly. Over coffee, she told me about her childhood, how her adoptive parents were kind but always distant, how she'd felt out of place her whole life, and how she'd finally taken the DNA test hoping to find someone. Anyone. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a faded folder. I requested my adoption records last year, she said. There's something you should see. Inside was a document stamped, confidential, private medical adoption, 1973. The signature at the bottom made my hands tremble. Charles Whitman. My husband. Before tears could fall, Grace placed her hand over mine. It says here the attending nurse filed a note. She's still alive. We found her number. My voice cracked when I called, but she agreed to meet us the next morning at a small nursing home outside town. The next day, the old nurse looked at me with watery eyes and said, Mrs. Whitman. I've been waiting decades for this. She took a deep breath. Your husband wasn't a cruel man. The baby was born blue. The doctor said she wouldn't live through the night. Your husband was desperate, you were unconscious, and he thought telling you she'd died would spare you the grief. But she survived. And by the time we knew, he had already signed the adoption papers. The room fell silent. My hands shook as I tried to breathe. Relief, pain, and disbelief all mixed together. He hadn't meant to destroy me. He'd tried to protect me, and in doing so, he'd broken us both. But what broke me was realizing how many years we'd both lived as strangers, waiting for the same truth. If this story touched your heart, subscribe, because the next part will show how forgiveness can rebuild what decades of silence once destroyed. The next morning, Grace picked me up from the small inn I was staying at. The drive to her home was quiet, not awkward, just full. Full of everything we didn't know how to say. When we pulled into her driveway, 2 young boys ran out to greet us. They were her sons, my grandsons. The older one, Ethan, had my husband's sharp chin. The younger, Caleb, had my eyes. For a moment, I couldn't move. My chest ached with joy and grief tangled together. Grace smiled through tears. "Mom," she said softly, "they've been waiting to meet you." Mom. The word hit me like sunlight after a long winter. I had never thought I'd hear it from the child I'd lost. I knelt, my hands trembling as I pulled those boys into my arms. I could feel my heart healing with every breath. We spent the afternoon in her kitchen, cooking, laughing, and sharing stories that spanned decades apart. She told me about her life, how she became a teacher, how she always loved gardens, how she sometimes felt drawn to candlelight even before she knew why. I told her about the little candle I lit every year for her. We both cried, then laughed, realizing that in some strange way, we'd always been connected by that flame. Later that evening, Grace showed me a letter she'd written years ago but never sent, to the mother I never knew. I read it aloud, my voice shaking at the line. "I don't blame you. I just wish you'd known I survived." I broke down. She came around the table and held me. For the first time in 52 years, I wasn't mourning anymore, I was living. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I whispered a prayer for Charles. Not of anger, but of release. I finally understood, he wasn't a monster. He was a frightened man who made a terrible choice out of love and fear. For the first time in 52 years, I slept through the night, knowing my baby wasn't gone. She was home. If this story reminds you that healing is possible at any age, subscribe, because the truth that comes next will change how you see love, loss, and forgiveness. A week after meeting Grace and the boys, I asked her to take me somewhere, the cemetery where Charles was buried. The morning air was cool, the sky soft gray, and the road ahead seemed endless. I sat quietly in the passenger seat, clutching a small bouquet of lilies, his favorite flowers. Grace didn't ask questions, she simply placed her hand over mine as we drove. When we arrived, I walked slowly toward his headstone. It was simple. No grand gestures, no words of remorse etched into the marble. Just Charles Whitman, 1942 to 2018. For years, I couldn't bring myself to stand there. I'd buried too much pain, too many unanswered questions. But now, I finally understood the weight he carried, and how fear can twist even the best intentions into lifelong scars. I placed the lilies down and whispered, "You made a terrible choice, Charles, but I forgive you." My voice trembled. "You thought you were protecting me. Maybe, in your way, you were. But I want you to know, she lived. She's beautiful. You'd be proud of her." I stood there for a while, letting the wind carry my tears. It felt like a chapter closing, not in anger, but in peace. When we got back to Grace's house, the boys ran out again, wrapping their arms around me. Ethan handed me a framed photo they'd printed from our first day together. The 3 of us smiling. My heart swelled. That night, as I sat on Grace's porch, the stars began to appear one by one. I thought of the candle I used to light every year, that little flame of hope I never let die. And now, sitting beside my daughter, I realized something, the flame had never been for mourning. It had been guiding us home all along. I turned to Grace. "You know," I said softly, "I used to pray every night that God would tell me where you were." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. Maybe he just waited until we were both ready to listen. We sat there in silence, 2 generations of women, finally stitched back together by truth. My story isn't about tragedy anymore. It's about redemption, forgiveness, and the quiet miracle of time bringing everything full circle. Love never dies. It waits, through decades of silence, through loss and regret. It waits for the moment when truth finally finds its way home. If you believe every mother deserves the truth, subscribe to this channel. Because stories like mine remind us, it's never too late for love to find its way home.